All right, hey everybody, TG here, and let's see, it is August 13th when I'm recording this. Hope you guys are doing well. I am on my hotspots, so let me know if we have any issues out there in the comments. If there are, then hopefully I can record this and it will be good. So actually, let me see if I'll resume this on my side. So in case all this is glitchy, then I have a hard copy on my side anyway. But yeah, so I'm out at the beach cabin and enjoying, well, yesterday and the day before were nice weather. Check this out. There's a relatively big forest fire west of us out in the Olympic Mountains. And I know this looks like clouds, but actually, this is right here. You can kind of see through here. That is kind of the plume of smoke. And all of yesterday, it was kind of out there to the west and kind of drifting a little bit south. It kind of looked like some clouds, but other than this, there was not a cloud in sight. And so we could tell that this was smoke. And then by the time that evening had come around, the winds had shifted, and I mean, look at all this kind of smoke just kind of coming up over us and coming all in through here. It was pretty wild to see this change and all of that. And in fact, I think I have one more. Yeah, if you look at this, you can see that just a very, very nice sunset, beautiful weather, kind of like that. And then you just see dark, kind of, I don't know, almost brown, obviously smoky cloud over this like that. So pretty interesting to see. All right, let's see. I think we are struggling maybe with microphone on. Let's see. Well, it should be okay. Let me try that one more time I think the Moxie room is not getting this. Hopefully everybody out on the social medias, X, YouTube, all that. Hopefully you guys are getting what we need to. As I said, I'm going to be recording this hard copy on my end, but give me just 2 seconds here. Make sure I get the rest of the room on board, and then we could talk about the market, which obviously, making new all-time highs since the CPI came out kind of in line. Market was generally okay with that, and just kind of carries on with what we've been expecting. All right, let's see. Do you guys I think you guys get me in the Moxie room. Anyway, you guys probably saw the pictures. I am going to be hard recording this. Emil, you got me now? Yeah. And I was showing you guys the pictures that we had. That was all smoke over here. From some forest fire to the west of us. The wind had changed. Oh, Lauren, I'm supposed to be in the mastery in the trade room. Gosh, I don't think I knew about that. I'm wondering if my system is going to be able to handle this. I'm on. Yeah, let me know. I wasn't really planning for that today. I'm on a hotspot, and I thought I was only going to be on for about 20 minutes today. Sorry if my schedule is not working well. Am I supposed to be there? Probably am, aren't I? Gotcha. Okay, let me see. Let me throw it on. Throw it on real quick. We'll see how this thing can handle it. Okay. Well, good thing I wasn't out skiing for too long. I took my wife for a quick little zip out there. Okay, so I think we are in the mastery in the trade room now. All right, sorry about the delay on that, and we'll see what we can do about making sure I get all of this down. Cool. All right, I think we should be good in through here, and I'll do my best to kind of read the chat and everything. Okay, as I was saying, we know that the CPI came in line, basically. Market was happy with that, and of course, we are continuing to see things move up. The real story from what I'm seeing, yeah, get this laptop out on the jet ski. One of those days I might do that if I'm going to be out up in the Pacific Northwest on the yacht that sometimes we rent during the summer. That would be a lot of fun. I just need to make sure I have enough internet. Okay, so the market up here now. If any of you watch my weekend market update, you guys know that I was seeing a big difference, call it divergence, discrepancy, between the S&P, the NASDAQ, and then basically the rest of the market. So what that tells me is it was the rest of the market versus the mega caps. And the interesting thing, I'll just kind of jump to the chase right here because we are starting to see some differences. The internals here is one of those things that I was also noticing that was important. Let me kind of keep zooming out here to working. There we go. It was important to see in through here that right here, clearly we were seeing negativity in the market. A lot of heavy days, a lot of volume was coming out of this, order flow was coming down. And underneath the surface, we were noticing and seeing that we had a lot of stocks starting to move down. In fact, we could see that we had breadth starting to move down. We had the 20-day and 50-day breadth at both 80%. And I said, look, that is way too high. We should start coming down. And we did even have that, oh, you could almost say the August seasonal weakness kick in. And then we had the mega cap earnings of Meta and Microsoft, and yet the internals did not support that. We had that gap up, everybody knows about. It sold off on Thursday, and then we had that giant gap down on Friday, which was fantastic. At least for the downside, because that's what I was looking for. We were able to capture some of that, took a few trades. And then I was expecting the market to bounce back because, of course, the market never goes straight any direction. There's always going to be a bounce back and forth or anything else like that. And that's why on Monday we had that big move up. And then the interesting thing to see was for the next week, you can see here, order flow was virtually non-existent, not much going on. And I think what was happening is people were trying to figure out, okay, well, is this really the time that we want to start just dumping in long? Well, probably not. Or is this the time where things are going to start coming down? We know the seasonal weakness and all that kind of stuff. And if we looked at something like the IWM or the Dow, even the XLF, RSP, and we could look at a lot of things. They were down and they were continuing to stay down, but the Nasdaq and the S&P were actually staying up, and that was mostly because I'll say Tesla finally got in the game. Apple started to stay up. The FANG stocks were staying up. The mega caps basically were staying up. Now they weren't necessarily getting pushed hard, except for Apple with big news. And then we kind of got a little bit more right here. You could see a little bit of weakness in through there. And then I think that was basically people kind of trying to say, hey, let's be careful about CPI. We don't really want to deal with that too much. And just in case it comes out hot or whatever, I think people were kind of lightening up a little bit coming into the CPI report. Well, CPI report came out in line, and it basically said, yeah, there's going to be no problems with inflation. And we know that, say, the jobs numbers were kind of weak, and interesting situation that's going on there with the fix and the new appointee and all that. And so the market said, oh, well, if that's not going to be a problem, and if jobs are kind of weak, well, then we really see a rate cut coming. The likelihood of a rate cut continues to get bigger and bigger. And yesterday was basically follow through to the upside. And you can see that we really did start to have some follow through up here with the internals. You can see here we started to have some strength with the internals. And so yesterday was a pretty darn good day. All right. And so we can see that through that lens. And of course, we know SPX doing well. Those of us in the Moxa room, we've kind of been joking around with August 1st being the great pullback of the August, because that was right there. We had a gap up. It was a complete failure. And then you can just see it rolled over and rolled over really, really hard. And from here, I would normally be expecting that we should kind of retest the low area. That's exactly what I was thinking. I've put it out in my weekend videos and all that kind of stuff. And that's what we've been looking for. And, we just didn't get it. We just kept climbing and crawling up higher and higher and higher. It was unreal. Very, very impressive and amazing. But I'll show you what we were looking for. If we look at the RSP, and the RSP, if you guys kind of bear with me as far as the speed goes, hopefully everything's doing all right with out there on my hotspot. We'll see if my phone overheats or something. But I'll probably go a little bit slower with the charts and maybe a little bit more commentary as opposed to just flipping around on all these things. And then if we look at the RSP, and I think the Dow did this, the IWM basically did this. A lot of the major indices over the last couple weeks, and when we got that pullback into August 1st, basically pulled back to their daily 50s. And that is a very common area that I would be looking for as far as a moving average support. And you can see that the RSP, which is the equal weight of the S&P, Very, very important to understand that and how to look at them and how to separate the differences between what the mega caps are doing, or, cap weighted, versus the rest of the market. And you can see here the rest of the market, the basically S&P 493, pulled all the way back down to the daily 50, and you can see here it did retest the lows right there. That's what I was expecting from the overall market, but you know what? This market's too strong. Those mega caps, way too strong. They kept the market up, and you could see the discrepancy. S&P from this point just kept moving up and up and up and up, and here we are like this. Whereas the rest of the market did actually run into some resistance. It did come back, retest the low area. It held, and then you can see because of CPI, now they are on board and they are breaking out now for, or at least moving up strongly over the last 2 days. And it was all because of the CPI. That was the trigger. But we could see that this thing was starting. This is why with the Moxie room and everything, I was getting out of any of my downside plays. I was out of, gosh, what day is today? I mean, I was out of by Friday. And I held one more until just before CPI, and I saw how the market was reacting even before CPI. This market's too strong. It's too strong, and I'm not going to take the risk on CPI. But you can see right here where the market started to actually move back up, and that's the trigger. And this was a very, very nice pullback into the daily 50. The challenge was that, as I keep saying, and I will keep saying this so that everybody kind of understands where I'm looking at with this, that underneath the hood and looking at the rest of the market, the majority of stocks and indexes and stuff like that were coming down to the daily 50. It was the mega caps and the NASDAQ and S&P that basically stayed up. Yeah, of course, Thinkorswim always getting a little overloaded. And so that's basically what I see in through here. And then that's the RSP, so that is the rest of the market. Now let me see if I can get over to the IWM as slowly as we can and do. Oh, cold. Yeah, nice. I see. All right, now zoom in here on the IWM, and then we'll get the hourly. Yep, we'll through here. Yeah, Shepherd, TEM, very, very nice. We can talk about that one too. All right, and here's the other thing. You can see with the IWM, nice big kerplunk. I mean, we had this big move. It was being telegraphed. We saw it coming for years. You can see here on the hourly chart, you see how the Moxie indicator was, see how price was over the hourly 50 right here for quite some time. That is what I call an inverse trampoline move. Those of you out on X and LinkedIn and YouTube and whatever else other social medias we're on, if you are not familiar with what I do and how I trade or the Moxie indicator, this is the power of the indicator. It really does give you a heads up as to what's happening and what to expect as far as momentum. And you could see that leading up to this, call it the seasonal weakness or call it the market was overbought, whatever situation it was, we were seeing some things. And you can see that price was over the 50, but notice how each day, the Moxie indicator kept moving lower, 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 lower. And so this is why I was getting cautious with the market. We did take some short trades, some downside things. We even had a put fly on the IWM, and we got everything we were looking for. We absolutely here like that. Now the real surprise was that it recovered so darn well. You look at this, that even though the IWM didn't really move up like the S&P did over the last few days, I could tell. I look at this thing and I said, this doesn't look like it wants to go down. It just does not want to go any lower. And so we exited our put trade on the IWM. We got a small profit, better than a poke in the eye, but we had a small profit on that. And then CPI came out, and yeah, look what's happened over the last 2 days because of the CPI. And the whole reason for that is because a cool CPI, number one, means good for the market, good for the economy, want inflation coming back, and that the Fed is coming back. It doesn't really work for the narrative. They can't. Jerome Powell has told us he's not going to cut rates if inflation is going to be a thing, and everyone's worried about tariffs being inflationary. And so far, it hasn't happened. And so more and more, the market thinks that interest rates are going to be cut, and of course, the small caps love that. They absolutely love that idea. And that is why we're seeing the IWM just absolutely scream higher like this. So amazing type stuff. Absolutely amazing. And then, all right, so let's take a look at a couple of the good trades that we've been having in through here. If we get TEM, now bear with me on this and get the Wi-Fi and computer. I've got about 5 more minutes for those of you who are with me on social media. And then I'll wrap that up. We'll see if we can take some of my bandwidth load off, and then we can maybe go a little bit faster in the rest of the room. And just remember, those of you guys out there on the social medias, if you come over to simplertrading.com/Moxie, that's where you guys can find out more information about the Moxie indicator, the videos that I do and that I put out, and the way that I trade and all that kind of stuff. Now, let me clean this one up because this is something I've been talking about for weeks at this point with TEM. It has been certainly an exercise in patience, fortitude, and kind of just waiting for the bigger picture because TEM was looking great back here. And we traded it a couple times, had a good position, all that kind of stuff. And it really looked to me like it was on its way to wanting to break out and move higher like this. And the market was doing pretty well. And then TEM just decided to do its own thing, march to its own drummer. And it decided to pull back over the last, I mean, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. Basically pulled back over the last 7 weeks, even though the market continued to just absolutely scream higher. It was a little frustrating. We had a lot of questions and comments in the Moxie room, like, what are we doing with this? Are we holding this? You know, we're behind, we're down on it. Like, what are we doing? And I said, guys, I need you to understand. I need you to just step back a little bit and look at the bigger picture. This is a weekly chart. And I said, bigger picture, it looks good to me. I know that I'm usually a sharper trader, swing trader, a little bit more nimble. But I said, this one, I think this thing is really loading up. I think it's going to be big. You know, of course, Nancy Pelosi's in it. So, you know, she's in it. We're going to be in it. Why not? And so I thought, let's stick with it. And I looked at it and you could see that basically price was pulling back into the weekly 50. I thought, hey, that's looking pretty good. Let's give it some room to wiggle around. And you can even see here, it basically created a double bottom on the weekly chart, even just from price, you know, right in through there. And then if I move in a little bit closer, and you can see this thing's had a lot of excitement, you know, big move there, big move there, big move there. And I really thought that that was going to be the area where price actually starts to get up and break out. And once again, it just didn't. But again, no surprise. Like, okay, even though I wanted to break out there, but the fact that it didn't, I mean, you look at that right there. Yeah, kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And I said, okay, so if it couldn't get through there, let's let it recoup. Let's let it repair, racks, get some friends, you know, to get some momentum. And now look what it's doing. And I think also part of the reason is if we come over, let's see, if we get here, the daily and the hourly charts. Again, let me kind of keep zooming in on this thing. Slowly but surely. Come on, cell phone, you can do it. There we go. All right. So I thought, all right, last bastion of hope, also total risk is going to be earnings. Earnings is always a gamble. We never know what to do, how this is going to be. Is it going to be great? Is it going to be terrible? Is it going to be neutral? Like, what's it going to do? And I was thinking that this generally should be fine. But look, now look at this. Coming into earnings, we had price lower. Look at the Moxie indicator. Higher. Okay. Once again, those of you who are not familiar with my system, this is the Moxie indicator. It's a divergence tool. It's momentum based. And what it was telling you is even though price was lower, internally, momentum was starting to go higher. That is the whole point of this divergence, okay? I don't even make this stuff up. This is just how this thing works. And you can see this, and I said, we got to just risk it. Let's see what happens on earnings. It did pop up. It pulled back into support right there. The Moxie indicator was firing. Everything was looking good. And what we did is we added right there. I think, what was it, 3 days ago? Whatever the day that earnings was, I let it settle down a little bit, and we added to it. We put on some calls. We already had some pretty good stock position with TEMT, and just look at this thing go. Very, very happy. You can even see that there's sustained volume in here. Of course, there's a squeeze, but there's been a lot of squeezes in this. And now we have the daily 8 crossing over the daily 21. We've got the daily Moxie indicator firing. Basically, this thing now looks like it's firing on all cylinders. Yes, it is back up to its prior high. So maybe you need to be a little bit cautious if you wanted to get into this and initiate, because it's already up here. It's already, at resistance. I feel like this obviously around 60 was the better entry for this particular move. And at this point, I'm fully loaded on this. I'm pretty comfortable. Whatever this thing wants to do, I'm going to be ready. Even if it wants to back off a little bit and then go like this, I'll be happy with that. If it wants to keep trucking, I'll be even happier with that. So I think Moxie Crew, can you confirm were we up 80 or 90%? I think we're up even higher, because since I looked at it this morning, this thing's up even higher. I think on the latest entry that we put on, aren't we up like plus 90%? Plus, if you look at TEMT, well, I should just give myself a second on that one. I know we're up pretty nicely on TEMT too, because we were starting to get into that thing. Oh, Nick, nice. You're up 120%. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, you guys kind of looking at a Head and Shoulders. I don't know. Are you guys looking at this thing? Is this kind of the Head and Shoulders that you're looking at? I think the challenge with patterns is it kind of depends on what we're looking at and at what time frame. While that might look like a Head and Shoulders, or maybe you're saying it's a failed Head and Shoulders, I could easily just as much say, well, it looks like a flag. How about that? Here's your flagpole. There's your flag. I think the challenge is when price goes sideways, it's hard to really wrap much stuff around it, because, well, there's no trend. It's literally sideways. It can go up, it can go down. It starts to hold certain moving averages, and then it doesn't hold certain moving averages. And I think that's the issue. So yeah, I wouldn't really try to wrap too much around this. Of course, a Head and Shoulders would work if this were bearish, but it's not bearish. It's really just sideways. So that's kind of what's going on. And then we'll come back over to one more thing that we had a really, really great trade with, and then I'll sign off on the social medias here. Let's see, A-Lab. This was another fantastic one. And this was also because of the Moxie indicator. Of course, there were some price patterns here, because, I mean, just look at that bull flag. And again, I don't know if you guys want to wrap any kind of pattern. Was there a Head and Shoulders? Was there an inverse Head and Shoulders? What kind of patterns were in this? Does it matter? Because it was chop. It was completely sideways. So it's hard to really wrap patterns around things when they just go sideways. But what I liked most about this is this had a really, really nice, completely sideways flag right into an uptrending moving average. The Moxie indicator was staying above zero. Massive squeeze. Of course, we know John Carter with his TTM squeeze, and now we have the Squeeze Pro and all that kind of stuff. And it was just all right there. I mean, this thing was a delicious setup, thinking about tasty trade on that one. And this one, you guys know I had the really, really big trade on SOXL, got that little over 2,000%, turned $38,000 into $680,000 in 30 days based on that trade. And ever since then, everyone's like, oh my gosh, you got to tell us when you're going to go big on something. I was like, all right. I'll let you know when I go a little bit bigger on something. A-Lab was one of those. I certainly communicated to the Moxie crew and the group. I said, this thing is looking pretty good, and that we should look at this thing. And I was like, I think this is going to go. And I said, I'm going a little bit heavier in this one, guys. And we put it on right there. And you can see right there, we have the Moxie price trigger right there. And look at this thing take off. Absolutely just great move in through here. Now, I was taking profits along the way, because again, you never quite know what's going to happen. And we had earnings. Who knows what's going to happen with earnings? And so the final exit that I had right there was at the peak of the thing on earnings, and it was 400. What was it? 470%, guys. We've had so many numbers. I keep forgetting all of them, but I think it was 470% we finally got on that call. And it was from here to here. Great trade. Awesome. And I actually know that a bunch of the other Simpler crew were on this. I know Danielle was on that. I think Henry was on it. I mean, who else got into that thing? But yeah, it was a nice one. All right, give me just a second here. I'm going to wrap up. Let me turn off the restream. So those of you in YouTube and Facebook and X and all that kind of stuff, if you are interested in coming over and checking me out, simplertrading.com/Moxie. And other than that, let me sign off, and I will be back with you guys in the Moxie room and the Mastering the Trade room in just 2 seconds. I'm going to be so like, what? Can I just grab some coffee really quick?